Hi everybody, welcome to Readers of the Lost Art with the channel Gimp, Stuart, Toe, and we are carrying on with the slowest reading of In Search of Lost Time,
It's
Remembrance of Things
bloody
Past
slow, isn't it?
in
How many
humanities.
pages are we going to cover today?
Well, it's almost like a negative target, isn't it? Like let's go
Should we
backwards.
go backwards, yeah, and recover some old material? I think page 2 had a lot more stuff to mine. We need to spend a bit more time on that.
Well, we genuinely don't mean to put people off, but we just think leisurely and slow is the way. Like pilgrims going to Santiago de Compostela.
That's right.
We're in no hurry. We have our staffs and our scallop shell hats.
Talking about Santiago de Compostela, did you know that our friend Paulo Coelho, he never actually made it? For the folks who didn't watch our video on The Alchemist,
Shame
Paulo
on you, by the
Coelho,
way.
exactly, Paulo Coelho, just foreshadowing the quality of his work. He never finished this Camino de Santiago. He took the bus the last 200 kilometers.
No, we were agreeing,
Terrible.
despite it being your favourite book, The Alchemist, before we started. By the end of it, we had an agreement, didn't we, that it was awful.
We did, yeah. Yeah, 3 out of 3.
And
Thumbs
just
down.
for those who are interested, occasionally we'll do something odd like The Alchemist just for fun. But I also sent you, Stuart, the Emile Cioran, A Short History of Decay, which is as cheery as it sounds.
Oh, I love it. It's right up my alley. Dark, miserable,
Did you get a chance to
depressing.
read much of it?
Yeah, I've read about a quarter of it, and I'm going to crack on with it. So yeah, I think we're definitely going to be doing a video on that at some point as well
Yeah,
in the near
just for
future.
those who aren't familiar, it's slightly Proust related because this guy was an influence on what do you call him? Samuel Beckett. No, yeah, I think he was actually. Yeah, Samuel Beckett read about Emile Cioran, who was a Romanian who spent a lot of time in Paris and became basically a naturalized French guy.
Mm.
And he wrote really. I think one of his books was The Problem with Being Born, and he also wrote this book called A Short History of Decay. And the titles really do him justice. They're absolutely brilliant.
Mm.
But anyway, that was. I need to check my sound because I'm getting complaints.
It's a little bit quiet, to be honest, but I've had to crank up the volume on my headset to
Right, do you
hear.
know why? Because I had it on the Apple Mac. Is that better?
Yeah, I can turn the volume down now. I had it cranked up.
Right.
There we go.
There you go, everyone. Idiot me. The metal plate in my head has been removed. And I've got a very good mic, but I often forget to actually set it up. So, hey ho.
There
I
we
hope
go.
that's better for everyone. Thank you for complaining. Yeah, right. We should be good to go now. Right. So, Proust. We're going to do Emile Cioran, A Short History of Decay, but in the meantime, that's just putting off the inevitable, getting back to Proust.
Let's
So,
do it.
what was your reading like this week, Stuart?
I haven't read any Proust because I've read way ahead, so I need to slow down a bit now.
All right. So we finished on Bluebeard, so to speak, didn't we?
We did, yes. We got to page 11.
Right. So do you want to give your first initial impressions, and then we'll just pick it up from there?
Yeah, let's forward. I'm trying to just jog my memory. So, from memory, this is where we get up to the bit where he starts talking about the family, like family dynamics and things like that. Let me just get.
He's just used the magic lantern you showed us last week, didn't you?
That's it. Yeah.
And then as we go down, what I found quite interesting is you start to get introduced because it's still very early days in the novel, but his father is obsessed with the barometer. I think that's it. You want to scroll down, Stu?
Yeah, I'm just going to switch windows. There we go. Which page were we on?
It was just past the Bluebeard.
There we go. Here we go. Yeah, page 12. Got it.
So we start talking. You start talking about the father being obsessed with the barometer, and
Yeah.
I just love this particular line. His mother looks at the father, and she looked at him with tender respect, but not too hard, not wishing to penetrate the mysteries of his superior mind. That's what it's like at Shea Taylor. I wish.
What was did his father do? Was his father a surgeon, wasn't he? He was into something medical.
I think it was because I think
He's quite
apologies.
well-known
It's
surgeon.
ages since I read the biography, but I think his father, and then I think his brother inherited the family tradition and
That's it.
became a relatively famous. I can't remember whether it was the father or the son or both were prostate surgeons.
Something like it's definitely like urology.
I think his brother
Committed
pioneered a
first.
prostate for all those men watching who now feeling very uncomfortable.
Yeah, because I think Proust himself was a bit of a disappointment in the family, wasn't he? He was like the sickly kind of I won't say unloved child, but he was the one who didn't produce.
But
Yeah,
it's
go ahead, Paul.
in many ways he didn't produce, except we'll find out later on when he went to his bedroom on his own, the filthy little onanist, as that's in a few pages' time.
It is, yeah.
But yeah, it's the way. So then the father's obsessed with the barometer, and I just love in a short period of time, it gets all the little peccadillos and all the little personalities of the family. So he talks about the grandmother saying at last one can breathe and she wants to be out in the garden. But then even when she's out in the garden, there's a bit here. And apologies, my translation might be very slightly different to yours. So she's gone outside with her keen, jerky little step, regulated by the various effects wrought on her soul, by the intoxication of the storm, the force of hygiene, the stupidity of my education, and of symmetry in gardens rather than by, and then it goes on about getting her dress dirty. But she's got there are various the intoxication of the storm, the force of hygiene, the
Mm,
stupidity of my education, and of symmetry in gardens. So there's all these mixed motivations, and that's just at the personal level. That's with the grandmother, the way, why is she in the garden? Why does she love nature? There's always a mix of emotions. That's with
mm,
one person. And then you get the way in which the individual characters in the family interact. Later, in a short while, we'll get to see the two sisters just being bizarre in their ears have atrophied in terms of other people's speech, which is quite a funny gag that keeps going. But there's just it's just that there are no one-dimensional characters, and even within an individual character, there are layers of why they do things.
yeah.
So you're not going to disagree with me.
No, I think it's a fantastic narrative already. I just find it quite interesting the way he's kind of on his own and we jump into all these descriptions of characters. He does it obviously very differently to what a modern author or like kind of the typical literature people would read nowadays, when it's like, oh, and this is so and so, and this is who they are, and this is what they do. We suddenly get thrust into a very active kind of moving scene, and it's like you said, we see all these kind of the different angles of the characters all at once.
And even at the low level, I think we're being prepared. And someone in the on the channel, I had this. I don't. I've got this ambivalence because someone said they were reading along, but I kept referring to later on in the book.
Mm,
And what was this going to ruin their enjoyment? But as I explained on the channel, from my perspective, let me know what you think, Stuart. But from my perspective, it's very, very difficult to talk about the book and pretend there aren't links to later volumes or to
yeah.
show how he's constructed it. I just think it's going to be impossible to live in the moment, which is ironic because it's one of the themes of the book. But if you just focus upon the particular text right in front of us and don't foreshadow some of the subtleties and nuances, I just think it's a bit artificial. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, it's always different with a book or a kind of a new work. Is like, is it important to know a little bit about the overall like narrative and the themes before you read? I guess something like Proust, it's such a big multi-volume work. I mean, was it in the Guinness Book of Records, longest novel? It's got some claim to fame, something like that. I think unless you know what you're getting into, and I guess you know a little bit about what's coming up, what's interesting, it's gonna kind of, yeah, it's so long and meandering that it's good to know a little bit about what to expect from it. But at
Yeah,
the same time, go ahead.
sorry, I interrupted you. Sorry.
No, I was going to say at the same time, it's like obviously because you've read it before, things are going to come up that you need to know what the significance of it is a little bit further down the line to actually explain what it is. So I think it's fair play to say, okay, this text is very important because of this reason, because people might want to come back to it as they read through the whole work.
Yeah, the other thing is that there aren't. I know you much prefer books that involve descriptions of car chases and, you know, 5 murders before page 3. You have
Picture
told me off
books.
camera they're your favorite books, but because this book isn't there, you know, there's a massive clue in the title, Remembrance of Things Past or In Search of Lost Time. I'll give
Yeah.
the ultimate plot spoiler away now. The book
Does he
is
find
about
it?
time. Yeah, it's like the alchemist. He finds the
Is it-
secret to
he
time,
finds it, and
sells it as a Hollywood script, and
is there
earns
a god
billions.
awful epilogue when he gets to the end and he lives with Odette happily ever after with his treasure chest full of Spanish doubloons?
Yeah. So I think it's legitimate to talk. I hope people don't mind referring on. But I do. I've said this last week, and I'll say it again. I think the first section, the overture, as part of Combray, it's very instrumental in setting up the whole narrative arc of the whole 6, 7 volumes.
Mm.
And I'm sorry, I need to get. I need to apologize to people. I keep saying 6 or 7. If I start talking about 6 volumes, because that it depends on the edition, but I can't keep saying 6 or 7, so I think I'll just start saying 6. Um, in the whole narrative arc, I think the first 45, 50 odd pages set up the overture. Really does set up various notions. So even I was going to segue into my next point, which is directly to do with the text rather than Witter on. But when the grandmother's husband, he's not allowed to have any brandy in this section. And the aunt winds up the grandma by trying to encourage the grandfather to have the brandy. And it's just, you know, relatively insignificant, except she really gets some. It says here, the torments inflicted on her by my great aunt, the sight of my grandmother's vain entreaties and of her weakness, conquered before she began, but still making the futile endeavour to wean my grandfather from his liqueur glass. And all the way through, when you know about the sadism that occurs later in the novel,
Mm.
this is an example of do you talk about what happens later, because there's really hardcore sadism described later. But what I really do like about Proust is the way he manages to convey the micro level sadism and the cruelty with a small c that we all practice on each other to varying degrees. I'm a card carrying sadist. I go out my way to find ways of being cruel, because I just find it, you know, highly entertaining. But I understand why. I need to shut up now before I get a knock on the door.
Yeah, you
But
PC plug.
there's quite subtle, the social, and when we get to the various salons, these, you know, very pretentious people all grouping together, backbiting and backstabbing. That level, I just think it's been very cleverly introduced in a very mild way that
Mm.
even a child can see.
Yeah, it's like, I think what comes to mind here is David Lynch, Blue Velvet. The very first the first 5 minutes of Blue Velvet, you have this kind of like walkthrough of, you know, perfect picture perfect postcard American society, and then the guy finds the ear on the floor and then he has a heart attack, and the camera pans down into the ground and you see all these worms and ants and stuff, and it's kind of like the darkness lying underneath the light of day. And that was, I think, for me, cinematically, that's one of the best visual representations of what Proust is doing here. He's saying that there's this darkness underneath everything. There's a negative side to everything, and it is even in this kind of lovely quaint family gathering, like you say, there's this element of sadism, and this, yeah, just something not quite there. And I think you're right to point out it's from a child's point of view, and obviously as the novel gets on, as Bruce gets older, he sees it from the adult's point of view, and it becomes more and more detailed, I guess.
But then, and it segues right from the great aunt trying to wind up her sister. He then witnesses all this, and he says about the drinking brandy. In my cowardice, I became at once a man and did what all grown men do when we are face to face with suffering and injustice. I preferred not to see them. Which, again, it just seems like it's a throwaway line with reference to someone drinking a few drops of brandy. So in the bigger
Mm.
picture, it's completely insignificant. But what Proust does better than almost any other novelist I can think of is the psychological acuity, the insights he makes over seemingly really insignificant, trivial things. When if you think that is an aspect of growing up, you learn to move from childhood to adulthood by actually betraying your better qualities, by
Mm.
not speaking up, by being prepared to look the other way, which is basically whatever your politics are. It's the modus operandi of 99.9% of most politicians. This
Mm.
ability to, for the supposed greater good, look past the iniquities and the things that you see right in front of you, or for
Yeah.
party loyalty, or for all these things.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And
It's
like I say,
interesting.
sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's interesting you said it because I can vividly remember being a child when you're taught like the rules or the norms. Don't do this, don't do that, and then suddenly you come across moments when those norms are broken, and then you kind of think this shouldn't be right, but it's almost like yeah, you realize then oh no, sometimes these things do get broken, these norms get broken, and it's this kind of like I guess like cognitive dissonance. As an adult you understand things a lot better, but as a child it's like a bit of a shock. Like, well, that's not
Well,
supposed to
you
happen.
understand things a lot better, but I'm sorry to fixate on this particular point, but I'm
Mm,
genuinely interested in the extent to what levels of psychological harm and distress it causes people by looking the other way.
mm,
So as a child, he as a child is perceptive of some of the things going on, and at this early stage, as he psychologically develops, he sees the type of suppression of the truth that
mm.
goes on. And yet, part of the price of being an adult is to ignore it. But it's psychoanalysis 101. Whatever gets repressed will return.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, sorry to go on about the politics, but it doesn't strike me when I observe whatever political party, I want to be bipartisan. I don't see many happy-looking politicians, and
No.
I'm curious about the way in which, if they're the embodiment of this type of social hypocrisy, most politicians,
Mm.
it's a psychologically very unhealthy atmosphere to exist within.
Well, I think it's quite common nowadays for people to enter politics with a kind of a idealistic vision. Is they last a term at best, maybe 2 terms. Who was the SNP politician? Was it Moira someone or the young lady? She was I think she was leader of the SNP for a while, and from all accounts that I've read about her and I've seen her political views, she came into politics with all the right ideas and quite strong ideals, and yeah, I think she lasted 2 or 3 years, and she said, yeah, I couldn't do it. It's just a den of vipers. I couldn't do it.
No,
So
I'm genuinely fascinated because to some
mm,
extent I never grew out of this childish phase thinking if things are wrong you need to speak up, and it never did me any favours.
yeah,
And it's not because I'm a morally great person. I think it's actually because I'm psychologically underdeveloped. But there's a story I remember. I've got a vague memory of it, but there was a family story in which my grandmother was a bit of an old battle axe, like the great aunt in this.
yeah,
And my parents and her and my grandfather were in the living room, and I wanted to watch something else. So I turned out. I could barely walk. Apparently, I toddled up to this massive old-fashioned television
mm.
and turned the channel over to cartoons or something, and I was smacked, as all children were in those
Yeah, I
days.
remember those days.
And I did this about 3 or 4 times, and then apparently I got really smacked the last time. So with my
Yeah.
last little strength, I toddled up and turned the whole telly off. So just to say, I never really got the whole look the other way.
Yeah, that's a quality. I would say that's definitely a quality.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. But like
Yeah.
I say, I'm not seeing it as a moral quality, more as
Mm,
you either go down the path of basically learning to be an adult. And
mm,
I think the point we can make is that Proust is describing here the type of unconscious stroke conscious decisions you make during psychological maturity. And there's no one good answer, because I'm sure as we go along in the novel, you get a strong sense of how unrealistic it would be to always speak the truth.
yeah.
So obviously part of the price of being in adulthood, but then what Proust is brilliant at, he shows these salons I've already mentioned, in which the pettiness and the backbiting, and there's one later on, there's one really poignant bit where one of the someone, I won't give too much away, but someone's describing they've had a really bad prognosis, medical prognosis, and the the socialites just say, "Oh, that's very interesting," and then carry on.
Mm,
And what really comes home is the loneliness of these superficially highly intelligent salons where everyone's the cut and thrust of conversation. But Proust is brilliant at describing the utter emptiness, that there's no true solidarity, there's no true humanity behind it all. And this is
yeah.
what I think makes these early pages quite resonant, is that Proust is describing how we slowly begin to learn all this.
Mm. Well,
So
they
what?
do say, yeah, they do say that children have an incredible sense of morality and creativity and awareness, and it gets beaten out of you, figuratively and literally. As you grow up, you're kind of beaten into this mold of society, and it's quite well understood now in psychology, but probably at the time of Proust was writing, it was just, yeah, that this is the norm. But the amount of kind of deficient, kind of mentally broken people that must have been around at this time is incredible.
Yeah, and then yeah, I'll park one of my thoughts because I wanted to talk about. I think maybe when we get to the bit about photography, I'll talk about the role in which I think I've briefly mentioned it, but the way in which the little boy Marcel, as he's describing all this, it's at the cusp of a society. He's still having these, the family having these dinner parties, and he's going to bed early. And I suppose it's all people could do was have parties and have dinners and talk to each other, because there wasn't all this social media, there wasn't all this technology that got in the way.
Yeah.
It's social intercourse was all they had. And yes, that brings with it the backbiting, and you can, even in this family, I think someone in the comments referred to the subtle sadism of the family.
Mm,
That's what families do, and it's always. He's also describing Combray the way it's described. I think it's in reality it's Illier area of France. It's the rural, slow pace of life that people have time to have dinner. They have time to backbite. Even in the busy, metropolis Paris later on in the novel, all they have are these endless conversations,
mm,
and I can see why. So I can obviously see what's been lost. And you could argue there's been lots gained in modernity, the ease with which we can do things like this, obviously.
yeah.
But I think this is one of the reasons the book comes across as very nostalgic. There's partly because it's about a young boy's childhood, and it's about a type of France that no longer exists. And within the first section, the overture, I think he actually describes, because he flits in and out of, is he an adult, is he a child, as he's narrating it. But he's describing, as we'll shortly see, the mother and the father coming up, and he's got into trouble by not going to sleep. But then as an adult, he reflects in the same section that all of this will be gone. All of this is gone now. That staircase won't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And it's really poignant in the sense that he's a small child. He's now later on, the narrative spliced with him being an adult. And all of these things seem so foundational to him as a person.
Yeah.
But life moves on, and the actual building that seemed to him eternal is no more.
Mm. Yeah, I think childhood's one of those tragic things, really, because when you're in childhood, you don't understand a lot of things, and you don't know how to do things, and you don't have control. And then obviously when you get a bit older, it's like with hindsight, you look back, and even the kind of the negative things, or the less kind of joyous aspects of childhood, you still reflect on them, and you look back, and in a sense it's like your foundation of your kind of ego. It's the foundation of your mind. And it's very interesting how he kind of weaves the present, Proust's present, within this narrative of his childhood as well, because it shows you how the things that happened when he was younger affect his present.
If we could just skate past quickly the rampant onanism, and there's a beautiful description. Well, again, why I like this description is I was going to say it's a beautiful description.
Mm,
It's about his grandmother's face. He describes her handsome face with its brown and wrinkled cheeks, which with age had acquired almost the purple hue of tilled fields in autumn. and it's just a throwaway line or two.
Mm.
And I'd invite people that this is completely my subjective response, but there's a painting I covered on the channel by Camille Pissarro called The Cabbage Field. And it's of this, I'm pretty positive Proust would have seen it. But that it's like an early morning scene in this. It's not particularly exciting painting, as the title "Cabbage Field" might suggest. But it's the morning light, and it's the field has been tilled, and it has a purple hue. And I'd be really fascinated to know if that was in Proust's mind when he was writing that.
When was it painted? Was it? It would have been kind of one of his contemporaries.
Pissarro was before Proust, yeah.
So he could have well seen it.
Proust died in, was it 1922-ish? And Pissarro was painting 1860s, 1870s-ish.
Yeah, 1922.
But anyway, I invite people to have a look. The Cabbage Field, and it's a beautiful painting actually. Because it hasn't got a lot of competitors for Cabbage Field Painting of the Year, but it is what I do think. That era. Sometimes to modern eyes they can be very dull paintings, but sometimes they just catch an atmosphere, and it's really evocative. So it just reminded me. And you've mentioned to me there is a book, isn't there, about all the paintings in Proust, I think it's called.
It's in Madrid, Paul. It's in the Thyssen Museum. This painting, I'm looking at it now.
All right, you should go out and see it.
It's down the road from me. I'll pop in and
can you see what I'm saying though about the? You couldn't get it up on screen, could you?
Yeah, I'm trying to do it now. I might have to stop sharing. Stop screen share. Here we go. Let's get it up now.
Because I wouldn't ask you to do this in the sense that there is a book all about the paintings that are referred to directly in Proust, and it's a brilliant book by a guy called Eric Corpeles. But having said that, he doesn't mention that this is it.
Can we see it?
Yeah.
Too far.
And can you see in the air the atmosphere? It's like early morning atmosphere.
Yeah.
And there is a purplish hue, particularly in the dark areas.
Yeah.
It's like atmospheric. The Cabbage Field, Pontoise. Anyway, hopefully I wasn't imagining it, but
no, it's 1873. So I wonder where it was. I'll have a look later and see whether it was maybe it was in France first, and then the Thyssen Museums kind of purchased it later on. But yeah, I think
I'll do on my channel. I'll do a couple of videos based upon the Corpeles book, which is about artworks that Proust directly references, just to supplement what we're doing. But like I say, that throwaway phrase, and my defense of my association, I think I wouldn't be surprised if he was aware of that painting and it was in his mind, even subconsciously, is that all the way through he refers to artists.
Yep.
And then there's the mother coming up the stairs. He catches the sound of her garden dress of blue muslin from which hung little tassels of plaited straw, rustling along the double-doored corridor, was for me a moment of sorrow. Everything's a moment of sorrow for you miserable git, Marcel. But then he gets into, again, it's all about a little boy whining about his mother, and it could be quite off-putting. But then actually, again, this goes to the whole of the book, as well as being about time. If you ask me what the second theme of the whole book was, I'd say it's about desire and the way in which getting what you want doesn't necessarily make you happy. And that is the next section of his mother coming up the stairs. He manages to manipulate the mother, the father, who I find quite an amusing character, because you've read your Jacques Lacan, haven't you? But for the people in the audience, there's a guy, Jacques Lacan, the psychoanalyst, who's interminably difficult often to understand. But he has this notion, which I find applies to this section. It's the le nom de père, the no of the father. But in French, I think it's called a homophone. It's N-O-N, non, and N-O-M for name, non. It just sounds the same. So the name of the father and the know of the father are the same thing.
Yeah.
And he's getting very anxious. The mother comes up with the father, and the father just makes this arbitrary decision to give him everything he wants and to let the mother stay in his bedroom all night.
Mm.
But he doesn't do it out the fact his father's a loving, wonderful father. He just does it because he's got a practical problem, a whiny little snivelling boy who he wants out of his hair. And he doesn't mind if, the mother spends the time with him. But to the boy, it's an arbitrary, random decision. And you get the strong sense he can read his mother, but he doesn't have an angle on the father.
Yeah.
And again, well ahead of its time, what Proust, you could argue, is portraying is this arbitrary nature of paternal power, le nom de the father.
Yeah. If anything's come from reading Proust for me already, it's reassessing this relationship with my own son. So it's actually made me kind of look at how I always say no, when he's going to bed. For me, it's just like, no, you need to go to bed because it's late and everyone's got work tomorrow and you've got school tomorrow and you're going to be a grumpy bugger in the morning if you don't go to bed now. And just reading this, I actually started thinking, oh, if I keep doing this, he's going to end up like Proust when he's older. He's going to be a bit messed up. So,
But
so
isn't that the actual this section? I think psychologically,
yeah,
what's also interesting is I don't think there's a simple answer.
no,
You either cruelly, if the mother wants to be, and it mentions also explicitly, I don't know if we've got to it yet, but the mother and the maternal line of the family are trying to be sterner with him
yeah,
because they've strongly sensed that he needs structure and he has weaknesses that need correcting. Ironically, the father's superficially sterner, but he doesn't have the courage. The actual phrase courage is used.
it is,
He
yeah.
doesn't have the courage to discipline him. So, but that begs the question. You could imagine a scenario where the mother and the great aunt and the grandmother did instill more structure and more discipline. But would Proust have changed out much? Would he have turned out much more differently?
Yeah, it's the eternal question as a parent. It's like where do you get the balance? There's different extremes. You can have this thing it's called like child-centered parenting, which was popular about a decade ago. It's basically let the kids do what they want, and then that's been disproven now. And now it's back to more stricter parenting as a fashion. So it's I guess you just got to do what you got to do. But I'm presuming at the time, Proust's time, is going to be strict parenting like all the way.
Well, as quite a sophisticated parenting expert that I am, I've
Mm.
often thought that tasers are massively underutilized in child rearing, procedures.
Well, I think there's a market for electric gates, isn't there? There's little gates that you can put on doors to stop toddlers going in the kitchen and pulling a saucepan full of boiling oil on themselves. I'm sure you can get electrified ones now.
Quickly moving on.
Yeah, Temu, wish.com, electrified child gate.
Oh dear. Right. So yeah, he's moaning about his mother. But the notion of the bit I read about the rustling along the double-doored corridor, the hung like little tassels of plaited straw.
Yeah.
It's even what I love about his descriptions are they can be incredibly visual. We'll get to a bit shortly where it's all about smell,
Mm.
but also even the sound of the rustling straw.
I find it's the moments in his life where he's had these very kind of deep emotional connections to the descriptions almost kind of take on an even higher quality, like the complexity of the sentences and the language just increases. It's almost like a heightened sense of remembrance. And this is one of those moments. This is like one of those profound moments in his life. Waiting for the mother's kiss, and the description is fantastic.
Darren's unhelpfully in the comments pointed out this is why I'm not allowed 3 miles within a school. That court case is pending, Darren. It's sub judice. I will see you in
It's gone
court
to the High
again.
Court.
Right, so where are we? The intensity, because ironically, because you're so slow at doing this and it's taken us so long to get through the text, Every week I go back and read the whole damn thing again.
Yeah.
But I notice different things, and one sign that I find quite interesting about that is that the fact that it's worth reading that many times. I don't
Mm,
just say, "Oh, I've read it 10 times before, I don't need to read it this week." I'm
yeah.
quite happy to read it. But one of the aspects I hadn't really, for the first few readings, it's the whininess, it's the annoyingness of the Marcel. But as I've read it more and more times, it just, the anger or my frustration, because I have a 1 to 100 mile an hour temper in about 3 seconds. But
Yeah.
that even for me, it's mellowed slightly, because what I'm getting a stronger sense of the more I read it, the more times I read it, is the intensity of what you feel when you're a kid.
Mm,
So the best example I could think of, and apologies to any non-Christians, but it's Christmas time when you're a kid. Even in my grossly dysfunctional childhood, we had quite good Christmases.
yeah.
And the intensity, but this thing about the mother, he's waiting for the mother, and he describes in this section how in some senses he wants it to be delayed as long as possible.
Mm.
And it was that intensity I remember as a very small child, waiting for Christmas and actually savouring the waiting.
The waiting was the best part because on Christmas Day, once it happened, there was this intense sense of disappointment. I mean, as a child, just getting to the end of Christmas Day and they say you've opened all the presents, you've eaten all your food, and you're just like deflated. But I remember vividly, even in November, like you start to get excited. Start of December, you start doing things. I mean, my school was Church of England, so we would have like Christian hymns and stuff, and we'd start learning. You'd be doing the Nativity and singing all these hymns at school, and you just started to get this real sense of excitement. And it always used to snow in North Yorkshire in Christmas in like the 80s and early 90s, and you get the first couple of days of snow, maybe a day off of school to go sledging, and it was just unbelievable hype. And then it gets to Boxing Day and it's just deflated. It's like a burst balloon.
Well, I also think that's a very good, what you've just described, Le Petit Mort and growing up as an adult, and the shoulder crushing levels of the barometer pressure as life sinks you down into the ground and everything becomes anticlimactic. But enough,
Absolutely.
enough of my average day.
Yeah, but think of Christmas now. I mean, I don't know how your Christmas is now, Paul, but my Christmas, even, I mean, having a kid, it kind of revitalizes it a little bit. But Christmas now is just bloody exhausting. I'm just glad when it's all done, there's no build up. It's just, oh, I've got to do this, got to go shopping, got to organize that, got to go and see this person I don't want to see, got to visit that family I don't want to visit. And then you're awake till 3, 4 in the morning on Christmas Eve doing all the presents. And oh no, forgot to say, you have to imagine like Santa's real. But I mean, all the effort that goes into it, it's like, it's one of those things I think a lot of people would like to do is to go back to when they were a child and experience Christmas again, because like you say, it's really something magical.
It's one of just a few times of the year that I can get away with various stuff, like when little kids say, "What's that strange man with a white beard doing in our chimney?" Oh, it's Paul. But again, quickly moving on.
Is that who it was? I thought it was Santa. Yeah, but usually Santa wears clothes though, so it's coming to think of it, it definitely wasn't Santa.
I always have a sock. Quickly moving on.
Quickly moving on. Yeah, where are we at now?
The real presence. Again, the subtlety. So he's finally, and again, this is the interesting thing, he basically blackmails his mother and admits to blackmailing her, and then admits to feeling guilty that because he's got what he wants, even he as a child belatedly realizes that it's at the cost of having broken her spirit slightly.
Mm.
And that, I think, again, sorry to repeat myself, but that feeds into later things about the very subtle psychological nature of sadism. There's the physical element. There's the Baron de Chaloux, who really does take it to physically demented levels. But this prepares the ground for the much more subtle psychological manipulation and the pleasure people get in manipulating people. And I really have to be careful what I say now, but there is this element in any, relationship, romantic relationship. It doesn't all have to be kitschy, 50 Shades of Grey. There's just the day-to-day, hiding the jam in the morning to annoy your other half, and the pleasure that can be derived from that. These are the things that keep people going, allegedly.
Yeah. Well, there's a YouTube genre for that, isn't there? Like couples playing pranks on each other and filming it.
Yeah, I think they're often quite staged, which is the sad thing, because there used to be, you got the sense some of them were real.
Yeah.
Like one of the cliched ones is the man puts the toilet brush in the dishwasher
Are
and
you
then
not supposed
tells
to do
his,
that? I
yeah,
thought
well,
that
he
you
says,
thought you were allowed to do
it's
that.
clean. What are you complaining about? And the wife
Yeah.
goes mad, and it turns out he's bought a brand new one and put it in the dishwasher. Yeah.
It would have been funny if he'd put it in used.
Well, that's the implication.
Yeah.
But she only sees afterwards. She doesn't realise he's bought a new one.
Yeah.
Keep up, Stuart.
Good prank.
Right, but so his mother's there. He's manipulated her. She bent her loving face down over my bed and held it out to me like a host for an act of communion which my lips might drink deeply the sense of her real presence. And that's the real presence is actually because you're basically a pagan Philistine Church of England, fake Christian. But for a
Me, no,
real,
not anymore.
well, yeah, but even when you were, you weren't. But the real proper church, like Catholic Church, the concept of the real presence, it's the whole concept of the transubstantiation, the existence of Christ in the host. So he's actually making there's a whole layer of religious theme, imagery that he's referring to in that description.
Yeah. It's like where I mean, again, foreshadowing things. It's when he gives the description of the inside of the Combray church a little bit later on. He links that to all kind of religious iconography and just the importance of it as being the backbone of the social of society. And here he's saying it's kind of the backbone of his own personal experience.
Yeah, and then this is quite relevant because at the very end of the book, the book is bookended, so to speak, by this type of description. So on those evenings when, as we sat in front of the house, beneath the large chestnut tree, around the iron table, we heard at the far end of the garden not the copious and shrill bell that drenched, that deafened, with its ferruginous, interminable, and frozen noise, any member of the household who set it off by coming in without ringing, but the double tinkle, timid, oval, golden, of the visitor's bell, everyone would at once exclaim, a visitor. And that, it's twofold. It's at the very, very end of the novel, he has this memory of that bell. But also, one of the involuntary memories he has that's described in a series quite close together. He's in a wood, he's an adult, and he's on a train, and it stops on the edge of some woods, and the engineer bangs the railing with a engineer's hammer, and this brings back this memory again. So the idea that over a whole lifetime, from a very small child to an adult, the sound of the bell stays with him. So it's the taste of the Madeleine, it's the sound of the bell, it's the smell of various flowers, it's all the senses Proust makes use of. I'm not sure, I don't know whether I'm odd, I am odd, but I'm not sure I have much of a memory for sound. So I've got very vivid memories of smells and the intensity of, especially in summer.
Yeah.
Everything seemed much more intensely alive when you're a kid. And I've obviously got visual memories, but I'm trying to think of maybe when Barry White died, I was so upset. I've basically blocked out all audio memories.
Yeah, it's interesting, that one, because sense of hearing is kind of quite a fundamental sense in terms of kind of evolution, really, because it's one of the senses. I mean, vision is the most important, I would say, but hearing is where you can sense a predator or something coming up from behind you. So yeah, I'm trying to think in
Well, do
terms
you
of
have any
like
vivid
sounds.
memories from, let's psychoanalyze Stuart, do you have any vivid
Yeah,
memories from childhood that are auditory, I should say?
probably just music, just remembering music that I liked. But I can't think of anything really unique. Like music is not necessarily going to be a kind of like a Proustian memory, isn't it? It's not going to
I'll give
bring
you a bad
forth.
example, and I can think of one, but it's not from that far back. But I used to have an old Staffordshire Bull Terrier, and she didn't respond to anything on the telly. But there was one particular one of these programs where people go to bed and breakfasts and compete with each other. And the beginning of this, the credits was this sign moving in the wind, and it creaked. And every time it creaked, she used to go bonkers and attack the television. And so that I've got a vivid memory of that sound, and then 5 second delay and a television about to hit the floor. So
Oh
that's
no,
quite a fond, memory of a dead dog. If I can cheer
expensive
everyone
memory.
up.
Absolutely. But yeah,
But
no, I can't think of any sounds. What sounds would it be? But maybe like old telephones. You remember the old telephones? The proper like
that's
ring,
actually a very
ring,
good example.
ring,
Yeah,
ring. Yeah,
the rotary
no,
phones.
that's it. You have to kind of go tick, 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 tick. Yeah, but what
Yeah,
else?
because
Yeah,
you were the
got
back
the
end of that
vivid.
generation, weren't you?
Yeah, when I was a kid, we used to have one of the rotary telephones. They used to like kind of dial the tone with a pulse, and then I think it was quite a novelty when we got the phone. So in the olden days, you used to get the phone through BT, didn't you? It was like rented. So when you got a line, BT gave you the phone, and you used to go to the BT shop in Middlesbrough, and you pick out the phone. And my parents were always very tight, so they got the windy phones because they were the cheapest. But then when we got the first like button phone as a kid, it was just amazing. It was like, oh wow, it's like on those American movies, we've got a phone with buttons. So yeah, I remember that quite vividly now.
But that to bring it to the text, I think that all this actually goes towards, and it's the opening pages and beyond. I think
Mm,
we've talked about it briefly before, but it's the physicality of everything. The fact that you're talking about a rotary phone,
yeah,
and I'm the memory I have of a dog attacking a TV, they're all based in our actual environment,
yeah.
as opposed to this is my constant refrain, the flicking and the sliding of a screen from one side to the other. And I think if Proust was writing, imagine Marcel, it wouldn't be wanting his mother to come up to kiss him. He'd be on his mobile phone under the sheets,
Mm,
not wanting his mother to come in and being scared of
exactly.
being caught out.
Yeah,
It would be a complete reversal of the whole ethos of the description.
yeah. Well, kind of the erotic aspect of it would be so blatant and so overt, it would lose kind of it would lose the eros.
Right, and then where are we? Yeah, they just describe Swann. And all I'd say about the description of Swann is it's I don't think it's particularly interesting, but it relates to later on in different volumes. It's this point about getting completely different perspectives. So
Mm,
you're getting a little boy's impression of this Monsieur Swann, and that's one perspective. The family have the other perspective, and yet they don't know his secret social life. And then later on in the book, you get yet more perspectives because at the moment he seems to be this urbane character. Later on in the book, other people's description, he's much more of a buffoon. And it's a very relativistic, I know people don't like phrases like postmodern relativism, but Proust actually is quite a relativist. The whole 6 volumes are all about these. There is no one true perspective. It's all about
mm,
these different perspectives, which I think is quite interesting.
yeah. No, I think it's fundamental to the whole structure of the novel. It's like the way the grandmother, her view of Swan is kind of rose tinted, really, isn't it? He's kind of seen as this very nice, interesting, smartly dressed man, and I think Proust interweaves it with talk about Swan's brothel visitations and kind of socialite aspect which the grandmother doesn't see.
And then I like the bit about the inverse, the caste system that the great aunt operates. So
Yeah.
basically, she doesn't like someone who's at a higher social level than her because that person fails to look down on someone to the appropriate extent that the great aunt thinks she should. And she thinks the woman that she goes to visit, who's of a much higher social standing, has let down both their social contract by failing to be enough of a snob. So it's like, it's a brilliant description of inverse snobbery. The person normally you'd accuse someone of being a snob, and she's basically accusing the snobby aristocrat of not being snobby enough, and that's the basis of her social caste system.
That's right.
And that's something else that really comes across in this section and beyond, is the rigidity. So they begin in this section, they begin to judge Swann by, the aunt gets annoyed because he knows a princess, and she starts to describe how annoying this is because she equates it with someone like a queen having an affair with a stable boy. She's got an answer for everything.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly judgmental, and it's incredibly rigid. But it's also, again, it's yet another, the way Proust has these psychological insights. I think, again, without getting political, but I do think that a lot of middle class people or privileged people, one thing they don't understand about certain aspects of the working class is the way in which the working class can be invested in rigid social structures. And I remember growing up in Liverpool, and if I said something vaguely, oh, let's all hug trees and teach the world to sing, my father would point out that a lot of working class people in Liverpool just wanted the chance to have the same type of privilege. And they really weren't about to man the barricades and create the next revolution. But you like me have spent a lot of time in very, very middle class university system, where the attitudes that those people in the universities have to the working class are incredibly off beam and inaccurate.
Yeah, it's the reason why I would argue the main reason why the populist right has risen up so much in the past few decades is because you have leaders who go through a social system believing they know what the working class want without actually asking what the working class want.
And in relation to this, what I think Proust absolutely nails is the psychological investment people have in structures, even if those structures are unjust. The downside is they're unjust, and they're based upon hereditary, and they're based upon prior privilege. But the upside is they give people a sense of security, they give people a psychological thing to invest in, stability, and we've gained much more social mobility. Well, we could argue this, but let's just say, the world is a lot more socially mobile in Western democracies. But there is something that's been lost, that, obviously we don't have Proust-type society, which for lots of people would be a brilliant thing. But I think it's unlikely that nothing has been lost. I do think there are elements. And I think Proust is providing a caricature of the great aunt. So yes, she's a terrible inverse snob. But I also wonder to what extent there is something valuable in what she's psychologically invested in.
I think at Proust's time there would have been a lot of importance to that in terms of probably she wouldn't have lived a difficult life because everything is very certain for her. I mean, it goes back to the phrase "ignorance is bliss." If you know your place in society, you know who you are. You don't question it too much. And I guess, like in inverse snobbery, is a form of like psychic defense, really. If you have an ability to kind of put yourself in a position and hold your position and not be challenged by other positions socially, then there's a form of comfort in that.
Yeah, but I also think it's back to that painting, the Pissarro painting of the cabbage field. A lot of the Impressionists, when they weren't doing urban scenes, a lot of their country scenes, I'm going to do a video at some point on the channel in future about it. Sounds incredibly boring, but it's actually quite interesting. The number of Impressionist paintings that involved roads or country lanes. And the point being that they go off into the distance, the horizon line, and that they were an integral part of isolated rural areas in France, deep France.
Yeah.
And the Impressionists get a sense of the scale of them, how non-busy they were, how empty they were. And then as the Impressionists do more and more paintings in places like Paris, and you see the rapid industrialization, steam technology, it's the passage from one world to the next. But the pictures they're painting of rural France, it hadn't changed much for hundreds of years. And
That's right.
then they're painting stuff like, Le Gare du Nord in Paris. They're painting bridges and train stations and things that are completely gutted the country in the way, at least the way it looked. And yeah, this is nostalgic. This is, there has to be progress, blah, de, blah, de, blah. But it's one of those things that isn't often talked about. And I think this is what the Proust novel, he's describing a childhood in that type of environment, just as that whole lifestyle is dying.
Yeah, I think you mentioned in previous videos, it's like a serious transition period in history that he's living through. Big, not just social upheaval, but economic upheaval, technological upheaval. I think you mentioned as well about the bit about cinema. It's something very profound about that.
I'm trying to. Where are we? Any bits you've identified?
Yeah, just checking back through my notes. So the main bit, and I'm not sure we're jumping ahead too much.
God forbid we should make progress. Can I just say one thing about the I'm trying to find it's the mention of Ali Baba, if you can find it. It's a paragraph just after Ali Baba.
Yeah, I found Ali Baba. This paragraph here.
Yeah, it said when he'd gone, told us that she had gotten it from his coachman, that he had been dining with a princess, and the aunt says, a princess of the demi-monde, no doubt. In other words, a prostitute.
Yeah.
And it really goes on. I personally, one of the things I can't get out of my head when I read Proust is this constant tension between the formality, the politeness, the civilized discourse of the salons, and then what's actually going on behind the scenes, the depravity, the fact that even today, if someone found out you were married to a borderline courtesan stroke prostitute, that's a huge scandal. I suppose the modern equivalent would be OnlyFans.
Yeah, it'd be like being married to Bonnie Blue, and then it would just be like acting like he's.
Well, worse than that, it's like me. If you've lived walked in my shoes and lived my experience, it's the constant mortal fear of being found out that I am a hugely successful, more senior OnlyFans performer, and that fear of being caught, it really does affect you.
Yeah, but as long as you keep the gimp mask on, nobody's going to know, Paul.
Don't go there. Right, so
back to the text.
But the princess of the demi-monde, the degree to which there was absolute depravity, and even very formally proper women like the great aunt were totally aware of it.
Yeah. When was is it Marquis de Sade or Marquis de Sade? I always forget how to pronounce.
Marquis de Sade.
Marquis de Sade, yeah. So is it Justine and what's the other one he did? The two famous ones, Justine and
well, it was 1001 Days of Sodom and Gomorrah, it was called.
I think that was it, something like that. When were they written again? You probably know this off the top of your head.
He spent time in the Bastille, so it was it shortly? Wasn't he freed by the French Revolution?
I thought he died in prison, didn't he?
But he was imprisoned in the Bastille, so it must have been around about. I think it was still the Ancien Regime.
Yeah.
But anyway,
1791, yeah. So, I mean, this was just over 100 years before Proust. And I mean, from a modern perspective, I mean, there's things in his novels, Marquis de Sade, that are still quite scandalous today. Still quite shocking. So,
well, it's the irony, isn't it? I'm careful how I phrase it, but it's the rigidity of the structures. It's the fact that with great bourgeois power became the power to set up brothels for both, gay and straight brothels, and. the more, again, it's this point I made earlier about the return of the repressed with Freud. It's the idea that the more rigidly decorous a society is, the actual worse it is under the surface, because what gets repressed returns.
Yeah.
So I've used this example before, but it's like in Victorian times, they would cover up piano legs in Victorian middle class families because it was too titillating. Reminder of a woman's leg. Meanwhile, the paterfamilias, the head of the household, could have been
Mm,
going to brothels with underage girls.
yeah.
And nay of the twain should meet. These two things were never spoken of together.
Yeah.
Which
It,
is, it's pretty dark, isn't it?
it's super dark. Yeah. I mean, kind of a completely different society that I know a little bit about from that time would be Japanese society, where I mean, prostitution was very open. Kind of sexuality was very open, and it was seen as a normal part of the ruling class would visit brothels, geishas and kind of inns and bathhouses and stuff like that. And there was even gay prostitution around then, and it was just seen as culturally normal. Whereas in Europe, like you say, it was hidden away, but it was still normal. It just wasn't talked about.
Yeah, it's the Marquis de Sade point you made, is that because the people who had power to do almost whatever they wanted, and it's the whole Epstein. I
Yeah,
think that's why there's almost remnants of the Marquis de Sade type when you're that rich and powerful and when no rules apply to you.
yeah.
Today, we think of that as incredibly rare, but I think why the Epstein files made such a splash is that it reminds people this stuff still happens under the surface.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, nothing in the Epstein files shocks me. It's the fact that there's worse stuff going on, underneath Epstein. I think it was Pasolini, the Italian film director. He
Yeah,
did a film based on the Marquis de Sade, Salo, I think it's called Salo.
yeah.
Uh, I mean that is such a dark film, and he brings the political angle into that. And he says that people with power. I mean, he specifically talks about Italy under fascism, but he's basically saying people with power who have the power to do these things do it out of pure sadism. It's a I think an analogy for British society will be something like fox hunting, like hunting with hounds. It's like the upper class perform a violent ritual, this time against an animal, against the fox, against a lesser being, in order to demonstrate their power. In Spain as well, very similar. I mean, bullfighting is fortunately going out, but it still exists, and it is a very highly stylized ritual of man's power over nature. And I think
Yeah,
it's
but
kind of
I
links
don't,
in.
I don't want to sidetrack us too much, but there is the instance where Francoise kills the chicken that I think you've mentioned the previous week.
Yeah.
This confrontation, I think this is the thing about rigid social structures that Proust is writing about. This confrontation, at least, is quite direct.
Mm,
So my problem with what you've just said is that people in Spain and elsewhere get really agitated about let's end bullfighting, but factory farming with normal cattle is cruelty on an industrial scale,
absolutely,
whereas
10
the
times
bull
worse. Yeah.
gets treated like royalty for 3 years of its life before it's killed.
Yeah.
And it's why I think modern society, and I think this is why Proust is so interesting to read, the confrontation with symbolism is more direct because it hasn't gone out of our society yet when Proust's writing.
Mm,
But with debates about things like bullfighting, if you read Hemingway's Death in the Afternoon, it's a culture's ability, whether you like it or not, to engage and confront symbolism directly.
yeah.
Whereas in modern society, terrible things happen, but if they happen in a bureaucratic enough fashion, like uh, industrial scale abattoirs, then it's not something you have to pay attention to. Therefore, it's not a real problem.
Absolutely. Well, I mean that's why things like abattoirs are kept behind closed doors, and the only time you really find out what happens in an abattoir is when PETA or one of these other pro animal, pro life groups goes in with a hidden camera, and the
But it's
reason is
it's it's also the perverse logic. I don't want to spend too long on this because I don't think it's totally relevant to Proust. But
yeah,
I remember talking to a guy in Finland, and he was saying that the Sami, the indigenous people, when they were doing their herding of reindeer, they would have small herds and they would kill them very close to the tundra where they were grazing. And for the animal, it was by far the least, agitated way to go.
Mm,
The EU comes in and says we will only allow abattoirs of a certain size. So then they had to start transporting the reindeer, miles to be killed, and
yeah,
that's
that's right.
incredibly stressful and cruel.
Yep.
And it's this desire to control. I'm genuinely fascinated in Proust, whereby, just to repeat, this confrontation with the symbolic aspects of life is still what he's writing about. It hasn't been submerged quite yet.
Mm,
So, for example, when we get to the Baron de Charlus and what goes on in these gay brothels nowadays, that wouldn't make much of a splash.
mm,
It wouldn't necessarily end someone's career because people wouldn't feel that they could judge that person as long as there was only consenting adults, blah blah blah. So with the symbolism and with this tight social structures, you had these social tensions where judgments were made. The ant, as we've just been describing, was acerbic and caustic. But there's a tension, there's a vivacity to the society for good or ill. And it just seems that in a modern technological society, a lot of that symbolic valence maybe is a chemical phrase, but that tension, that symbolic tension, doesn't exist to the same
no,
degree.
I think there would be some element there, but I think you'd really have to dig deep. And I think in the day-to-day experience of a normal person, you're completely right. You don't have that symbolic tension.
Right, now this really is, so we've got enough time to talk about it. There's a bit where he talks about if you can find the line where it's identical for everyone and need only be consulted like a page in an account book or the record of a will. It talks about, then it goes on to the thing I want to emphasize is social personality is a creation of the minds of others.
This one here.
I can't read that. My eyesight's so bad. Yeah, could you do that again? Sorry, because I'm terrified of increasing my screen without turning the computer off. I'm that inept. Yeah, that's perfect. And this bit that follows, again, I just think this is Jacques Lacan way ahead of his time. This is the idea that we project onto other people. This whole section, it goes on for about a page and a half, but he describes how we think we know somebody when all we're really doing is projecting our experience of them onto their facial features.
Yeah.
I just think it was a really, really insightful psychological description. So he says, we pack the physical outline of the creature we see with all the ideas we've already formed about him, and in the complete picture of him that we compose in our minds, those ideas certainly have the principal place. Because this goes on to later on, it goes to this concept of desire.
Mm,
Everybody's guilty of desiring the thing you think you're getting when you're holding that person or you're just projecting onto the person you think you desire all these qualities that often they never claim to have. But it's part of human nature that you project on, you fill in the gaps with your own fervid imagination.
yeah.
And that gets described throughout all 6 volumes. It's a human process, and the frustrating thing is knowing that we do it doesn't stop us doing it.
Exactly. We can't stop doing it. I think this is the section, as I was reading through it all those weeks ago, I think this is the section when I really just hooked me, the novel, and I just thought that, yeah, this is such a profound point. The way he flips between the different descriptions of the family members of Swann. I just thought it's just brilliantly done. And like you say, that stuff that started to come to mind was Jung, Lacan, Freud, more modern understanding of relationships. And this guy's writing this 100 years ago.
And again, it goes to this issue about social structure because because social ties, all the things we were just talking about in France at that time, were much stronger, there was a tendency to do this. Everyone had a much more tightly defined social role, and people would project onto you what was expected of you as much as who you were in reality.
Yep.
And we've lost an element of that, I'm pretty sure. But then what fills the gap? We have this concept of influencers, and we have people. It's almost like this whole process that used to be quite tightly socially bound has been externalized into social media. And we still do it, just in a different form. And then the question is, well, would it be better that we still do it under much tighter social control? Or is it better that it's been liberalized and democratized and put out there into the ether?
Well, I wouldn't say it's necessarily been liberalized, but it's definitely not been democratized, because I mean this goes back to the whole thing of platform ownership. You still have a class of people who own the platforms through which the information is disseminated, through which we don't vote for, and we don't control. What I would say is it's flattened social relationships, because can you imagine the complexity that Proust is writing about? I mean, even just in Combray, we haven't even got to Paris yet. The complexity of the social kind of mesh within this small country town, and the kind of the interactions, how people see each other, but they also know their social role. Online social media, I would say it's been flattened, Paul. I don't think there's a social role. It's this idea that I can be whoever I want to be. I can project whoever I want to be
Well, I was
on
going to
my social
say,
media
in
feed.
this section you've highlighted and beyond, it's actually about one of the mechanisms by which the family can project onto Swann all these qualities that they have experienced of him,
Yeah,
is that he has this separate life. It mentions, I think, later on, or I'm sorry if we've already gone past it, but the bit where he'd leave the house and then double back on himself, and he was friends with the Prince of Wales, and he has all these contacts.
yeah,
Their projection onto him of what's being described in this precise section is predicated upon the fact that they don't know all this stuff. He has a privacy. He has a hinterland. He's different things to different people. And part of what enables that, part of what allows privacy in a way of his character, is that the social structure was much firmer. So there would be, for example, we've already seen it described, the dinner party where people are doing witty repartee,
mm,
and it's not been described yet, but throughout the novel there'll be people flirting with each other and using words as seductive weapons.
yeah,
And there's also brothels whereby explicit sex is just pursued without any strings.
mm,
And the one thing enabled the other. The tension was allowed for, and the adept character is on the boundary. That's why we've just seen the aunt refers to her as a princess of the demimonde.
mm,
So there's always this constant tension between the power of the aristocracy, the power of the social structure, versus the baseness, the crassness, the crudity of what they also find room for in things like brothels.
yeah.
What I'm fascinated by is there is that tension, whereas what you're describing in modern society and social media about the flattening, people will now swipe for sexual partners, and the whole girlfriend sexual partner thing has been flattened.
Mm. It's broken from what younger people I know say is, there's constant streams of articles in the media saying your dating doesn't work anymore because social media has I think our friend Byung Chul Han
Yeah, the
talks about this in
transparency
some ways.
book, yeah.
He does, yeah. He talks about apps and the reduction of desire, in a sense that when the social media platforms, things where you have to swipe, and Tinder and all these things like this, uh, we know we can no longer project our desire onto a real person anymore. We have hundreds of people that we can swipe through, and it's almost like the fantasy becomes reduced because there's no ambiguity in there anymore. It's just become visual representations.
But the irony about the flattening out is that it's I'm trying to work out how to describe it, but it is fascinating that those people now, there is zero seduction. And this is, again, this book, in my notes, I wrote Baudrillard. I think Baudrillard wrote System of Objects, which was
Yeah.
in 1968. His book Seduction would have been after, quite a while after that, maybe 15 years later. But he was writing about some of these themes, the way in which the flattening effect has hit society.
Mm.
And again, just to repeat, Odette could be on the receiving end of the great aunt saying she's a princess of the demimonde. There's still this ability to straddle the two realms, or at least to know that the two realms are profoundly different areas.
Yeah.
But now one of the ironies is it's increasingly difficult to conceive of how people would meet a potential life partner who isn't a very closely measured part of their pre-existing networks,
Yeah.
because the way in which you swipe on all these apps, they're pre-selected for certain qualities.
Mm.
The way in which you or I, even you, younger than me, but the way you or I might have met someone in the past, guess what, in the old-fashioned way, in a pub,
Yeah. In
I'm
the pub or the
guessing
club.
is increasingly alien.
Yeah. Apparently, it doesn't happen anymore. It's crazy, or
But
very,
the
very rare.
but the consequence of that is actually really, really profound, because it means there's never a serendipitous encounter.
No, there's no magic to it. I mean, how it used to work in the olden days for younger listeners, was you just went to the pub with your friends, or you went to the club with your friends, and it was like meeting somebody was kind of secondary to the fact that you were just out having a good time, and there was no, like, you didn't have a list of, right, this is the partner that I want. I want this quality. I want 6 foot tall. I want brown hair. Blah blah blah. Like you do with these apps. It was just you'd go out and you chat to people and you'd interact, and there was always kind of that mystery. You meet someone, you don't really know who they are. You might be physically attracted to them, you might be attracted to their mannerisms, but then it would take time to get to know that person if you wanted to continue a relationship. Whereas nowadays it's this instantaneity. It's like, oh, like the look of that person. And when you read accounts on kind of like, I guess there's like the Guardian. I think they do it on a Saturday. The Guardian newspaper do like a blind date where they force people to have a physical date together, and it's very rarely that the date works out well, because people are so used to nowadays having this instantaneous, like, oh, I'm going to look at you. Yeah, you don't look right. You don't fit the bill. I'm not even going to get time to kind of take the time to get to know you. It's just almost like the physical in-person equivalent of swiping left or swiping right.
Yeah, I think one of the ironies I'm pointing out is in the old so-called incredibly structured era that Proust's writing about, as in this section that you've got highlighted, it's describing how people project onto Monsieur Swann what they think of him.
Yep.
But again, there's ambiguity, because he's actually quite a different person, or to whom is he the person he appears? It depends upon your role in the social structure and
Yep.
what you're projecting or not projecting. But actually, there's room for a lot of creative misunderstanding. This is his relationship with Odette. He imagines too much. And of course, he takes it too far with Odette. It's not, I don't want to ruin it for people, it's not a happy relationship.
Mm.
But Marcel does the same with Albertine later on. And the room for these errors is made, the irony is, there's, in this tight social structure, there's more room for error, in a way. Whereas, what are the chances that you of course you could be scammed online and stuff, but the chances are, if you're selecting your potential partners from this incredibly over transparent, to cite Byung-Chul Han,
Mm.
it's overly transparent. You're not getting any surprises. You're getting someone from the same social class, mostly from the same professions, the same political views. Everything is winnowed out, all real difference.
Mm.
And
But
then,
yet it seems to be harder for people nowadays. It's almost like there's no desire anymore. It's like there's disappointment, even though you can have exactly what you want. When you meet that person in real life, it's
yeah,
instant
but that's not
disappointment.
surprising, is it? Because what Proust's
Exactly.
writing about here is it's the active role of the imagination. The dark side of this is that to
Mm.
some extent we all end up with someone that we've imagined.
Yeah.
Whereas what you're describing is modern screen culture creates
You get
these
exactly what you
partners,
want.
you're getting exactly what you wanted. But that's not how desire works.
Exactly,
Desire
therefore,
needs distance. Desire needs non-completion to keep it
exactly.
going.
Yeah.
So it's again in Baudrillard's work. He actually has this phrase where he very sardonically says, he describes, these French people in the middle of an orgy, and one of them's looks smoking a cigarette, really bored. Says, "What are you doing after the orgy?" Meaning they're just bored, senseless.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the next paragraph or the next passage after this is well, Paul, after the description of Monsieur Swann. Proust actually talks about, the importance of this kind of caste system that he's born into.
Yeah, but just before we go on to that, there's the bit where they talk about a natural, his arch nose as a natural frontier. But they contrived also to put into a face from which its distinction had been evicted, a face vacant and roomy as an uninhabited house, to plant in the depths of its unvalued eyes a lingering sense, uncertain but not unpleasing, half memory and half oblivion, of idle hours spent together after our weekly dinners around the card table or in the garden, during our neighbourly country life. So this is the description of how the family see Swann.
Is this the one here? Just this one? Yeah.
And what that made me think of, like, remember the, degenerate days we had in a Leeds pub? But it was like week after week of this type of social interaction
Mm,
that was very unpredictable. It was just odd in lots of ways, really eccentric, with a really mixed bunch of people. And that's what's being driven out, isn't it?
yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think a big surprise for me where with kind of next generation, Generation Z, it was this that the thing they've lost is kind of the not just the physicality of human interaction, but it's also kind of the way a lot of time human interaction is confined to a space. So for us, he was at the pub in Leeds when I was growing up. He was, going to nightclubs, going to raves and things like that. And it was this kind of general sense of like you don't know what's going to happen. You have a general framework of okay, I'm going to go here and listen to music. Okay, I'm going to go here and do a reading group, and then we're going to have a few drinks after and have some banter. But you didn't know what was going to happen, and it was that excitement. It's like I wouldn't even call it desire. It's like it's kind of unpredictability. Kind of mincing my
I'm
words
sorry
now.
to interrupt, but I just had a memory of someone whose name I will not mention, but a very small ginger Canadian guy who
Homunculus.
who used to have to get a train home, and there was limited trains, and he would leave it to the very, very last minute
Oh, you
and
cutting it
run
fine.
off. But talking about unusual things happening and tension,
Yeah,
we never knew whether he was ever going to get home because I think on occasion he missed the train because he just left it
yeah.
ridiculously late.
And I don't think he had a phone either from memory. It was like the rest of the night, sometimes we'd spend an hour debating whether he got home or not, or what would happen to him. And it's hilarious. The funny thing is, Paul, what would happen when you needed to go and get your train home at like 11 o'clock or whatever time it was? We would carry on. We would go to one of the Belgian beer bars on, was it called Lane? North Bar, I think it was called, and then the Cellar Bar as well. And we'd carry on till about 2, 3 in the morning.
Well, I did sometimes join in with the karaoke. I stayed over, but
Yeah,
they were relatively rare.
I remember. Do you remember there was the bar? Was it Sandinista? There was that bar Sandinista, and then there was a big like music venue next door to it as well. And I think
This
sometimes
is
you
like
were staying.
Swann's Way for alcoholics in Leeds 20 years ago.
Absolutely. There was a guy it was the guy you knew with the bald head, and you
I'm
stayed at
not
his house
mentioning
sometimes.
names.
No
I know who
names.
you
Okay.
mean.
The guy with the bald head. Yeah, and I think you stayed out quite late a couple of times because you had somewhere to stay. And yeah, I think we went until about 2 in the morning. But just the vibe, just the buzz, just being out and about with real people. It's like, I mean, do people do that anymore? Or are we just too old to do it?
But it's definitely it's specifically related to this when it talks about half memory and half oblivion. Half oblivion definitely describes what we were doing. Of idle hours, they were definitely idle.
Yeah.
Spent together after our weekly dinners. There was food eaten. Around the card table, there was a we played various games, or in the
It was you.
garden.
Yeah, you bring the shogi boards and I think chess. Yeah, I remember you brought the professional timing clock as well. You it was like you turn up with this big bloody suitcase full of priceless chess sets and force everyone to play it.
Yeah, but it was drunken chess. It was a new
Oh,
sport. It never caught on, but I did my best.
do you remember? Again, not
Stuart,
naming
you do
any.
know people are watching.
I know, but do you remember, it's all clean and fun. Do you remember that shogi game we played? It was me and an American guy that I shan't name. And we played it. I mean, I had no idea how to play. He said he did know how to play, but he couldn't. And then obviously you were really into it at the time. And it was me and him versus you after 8 pints. Oh man.
Memories.
Yeah, crazy times. Darts as well. Remember darts? The darts
Can we
phase.
talk about Proust?
No, I want to talk about darts. I actually bought a decent 40 quid set of darts and left them in Leeds Student Union because we got so hammered once. Oh, darts. I remember that.
I'll just finish on this note because I'm sure people are bored. But there's yeah, and I remember I couldn't throw the darts properly because the irony was I'd done it sober. I banged my hand in a taxi getting to work because I'd given a lecture. I was all hyped up. I didn't feel the pain, and then the pain kicked in. So you had to get me a bucket of ice at the bar.
Oh,
And
I
we're
remember
trying
that.
to play darts.
Yeah, I
And we
remember
had a
that.
friend whose girlfriend was a physiotherapist. And she had to inspect my hand, and she said it was probably broken. But the night continued.
Well, hospitals aren't open at that time anyway, are they?
No, but I should have sued her for what's the word? She didn't fulfill her professional Hippocratic oath.
No,
Right. Well, I think we've gone off topic slightly towards the end. But
that's the best part.
what I suggest is that we return to start next week with
Yep.
this bit about projection.
Yep.
Because it is everything we've just been talking about actually segues with this idea as though one's life were a museum in which all the portraits of any one period have a marked family likeness, the same tonality. Because to be serious for a second, I know you were just drastically trying to kibosh a serious discussion, but everything we were just talking about, this idea, we're giving a practical demonstration of memory,
Yep.
and its interface with industrial amounts of alcohol. But that actually is the tonality. We have a sense of the tonality of what it was to be in Leeds at that time.
Absolutely.
And
But it's interesting. Just very quickly, it's very interesting because supposedly alcohol stops you forming long-term memories. No, so so it's very interesting how we have such vivid long-term memories. Can very clearly remember silly things like that. But it's because it was such an impactful part of life. I mean, it was fun. It was a moment in time.
But this idea of people that quote about museum and a tonality of an experience, it's basically Marcel's experience as a boy has elements of that, but then there's the tonality of the later volumes as an adult.
Yeah.
And it's my constant refrain to what extent, and we're just describing, depraved misbehavior of a past in search of depraved time.
In search of beer, no, in search of a good pint.
It is, but it's a palpable tonal museum-like experience that you can bracket off. That was if you're in a museum in Proust's terms, that was the room that you would call Leeds pub life.
Yeah.
And everyone involved would have very vivid memories and stories and projected experiences. That I don't want to play the old Father Time thing card, but that is what doesn't seem to happen anymore.
I mean, the equivalent of meeting people on the computer and playing Fortnite or whatever game is popular at the moment. You have to question, how impactful that is. Are you going to have long-term memories of, I remember that time we played that computer game and got that high score and things like that. Meeting up online, it's not the same, is it?
Well, it's just the fact that you could risk missing a train that meant you'd have to sleep in a train station.
Yeah,
These were real consequences that
they really,
actually
they really
made a
were.
big difference.
They really were. Yeah. Did you ever miss the train? I'm trying to think if you ever missed the train.
I think I had to once wait till about 1:30, and there was a
Oh
weird like
no.
engineering train took me home. I remember that. I remember having to
You
get a
just hitched on the
train.
back.
I remember having to get a taxi from Huddersfield that cost me 65 quid, and this was years ago.
Mm,
So that imagine that's about 120 now.
yeah.
I remember at least 2 or 3 occasions, which wasn't a bad ratio given how we pushed the limit.
Yeah, we really did. I remember you running to the train station with this bag full of chess sets, clunking, doo, 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 off into the distance. There he goes, bye, Paul.
Well, no one can accuse us of not having interpreted Proust through the lens of lived experience,
Exactly.
is
Yeah,
how
I
I'm
think we've done a good
rounding
job.
this week's off.
Yeah.
So, thank you for all those stalwarts that have stayed to this point and found out much more about us than they ever wanted to know. We will see you next week, where we will pick up where we left off with the concept of life as a tonal museum in different rooms. So, thanks everyone. Till the next time, all the very best.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.